I'm going to bring my man. We're joined with Koffi Kouakou. He is a damn good friend of the show. Koffi is African analyst, senior research fellow at the Center for China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Koffi, how you doing, man? You
Yes,
doing okay today?
I'm doing okay. Good to see you again.
It's good to see you too, man. I always enjoy these conversations. I was Trump doesn't quite get that you never punch down, and even when he like kind of notices it in his Truth Social, is like Medvedev is acting like he's president. No, he's not. No, he's not. You just miss his role. He is the man who is articulating the honest and actual Russian position with the energy and anger that it demands. Putin is the polished political one who will give you that position, but is going to give it to you in a very political way. So Putin is going to be very. Trump one day said, he says, he's very nice on the phone when we talk, but he does what he wants after the conversation. Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Yes,
that's his role. That's his job.
I think what they're doing is playing good guy, bad guy, and they're doing it
Yes.
so well, shifting back around. And in fact, when Medvedev was president, he used to be
Mhm.
even lukewarm and quiet. He couldn't say anything, but
Yes.
Putin was the one talking. Now the role have shifted and flipped. They're playing it so well.
Yeah. Medvedev is a hard ass, man. He is a
Yeah,
hard ass. I love that role. He plays that role
definitely.
very well. He plays it so well.
That's
Thank
true.
you, me, man. I really appreciate you joining me. Um,
Thanks.
my subscribers sent me an email yesterday. He did not
Mhm.
on today, so this is fortuitous. And he points out, he says, "Hey, I would like to know what is going on with the Sahel states." Now, you had sent me a message, I think it was yesterday, saying
Yes,
Nigeria is going effectively its anniversary. It's
yes.
been, what is it, 4 years? No, 2 years,
Three, three,
4 days,
2 years, yeah. 2 years,
3 years.
I would say roughly, if you combine the three countries, about roughly 3 years.
Okay, in 5 days.
But
5 days
Niger,
now.
yes,
Yeah.
but Niger was having exactly 2 years and 4 days yesterday and 5 days today.
What is the status of the Sahel
Mm.
states? Because what he wanted to know was specifically about security, but let's just get into the Sahel states so we can bounce back to security first.
Yeah.
Second.
Well, I mean, one of the things is the security is one way or another balanced out. I would even say improved since the French and the Americans left. And this is a hard one to tell people because the Western media keeps really ballooning, one attack here. But it's really important to talk about it, but it doesn't really give you a full picture. And
Yeah.
strangely enough, and you have to give it to those three states, they've managed to stabilize. I mean, these are vast countries, especially Mali and Niger. Niger is about 1 million. Niger is a little bit bigger than South Africa, just so 68,000 square kilometers.
Yeah.
And Mali is also in the 1 million. Burkina Faso is the only one that's very small. I think it's about 200,000 something square kilometers, roughly around 300,000. But this is a vast territory to police. And so you will have challenges on the security front. And they've managed to stabilize it one way or another with the help of Russia, especially in Mali,
Mhm.
at the borders of with Algeria, but also Niger. As you know, as you can see the map behind me there, you know, both countries have their, borders with Algeria, and this vast territorial connection is where most of these jihadists are running to find cover. And then there was a talk that Algeria was sort of giving them free range to give a hard time to those two countries. So Mali, especially Mali, was having a little bit of go at Algeria, and that the military in Algeria was sort of supporting. That's what Mali was alleging. But so far, things have calmed down, and the Malian military has improved tremendously with the support of Russia, but also on the side with economic support with China, same as in Burkina Faso and Niger. But mainly it's Russia that's really helping in those areas. But the security issues is still a problem, but it hasn't been solved completely. But at least there's some kind of support. that is making those countries, at least their armies and their defense, do much better than under the French and the Americans.
Do you know who the groups are that are involved in the security situation? I know
There's
in
there's so
oh,
many of
please.
them, Jamal. Yeah, there's so many of them. So you hear, I mean, they've been created and supported by outside forces. And every time you hear Al Qaeda, you also hear ISIS. You hear, jihadists. There are many of them. I know that the last time we checked, at least I checked, there were about 28 or 30 of these groups
Really?
running around in the Sahel. And the Sahel is not an easy place to police because of the harsh climates, the difficult environment to live in, and the military people. And these guys can run around and hide in the dunes in the Sahara Desert without being found easily. However, the Russians or the Africa Corps, I mean, remember, the Wagner group has now been converted into an African corps by President Putin and Medvedev. So they're providing them with all sorts of tools like drones to double check and to find out where these rebels are. But it's not quite easy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it's funny when we talk about the Sahel states, as you point out, Burkina Faso is one of the smallest countries considering. I mean, as you point out, Nigeria or Niger is larger than South Africa, which I didn't know that, by the way. Like when you look at the map, it's hard to kind of know it. So, but Ibrahim Traore has gotten so much more publicity than many of the other leaders in the other states. Why do you think that's the case?
I mean, it's very simple. That idea of sovereignty, Jamal, is something that most Africans have been longing for so long. I mean, if you took the case of Algeria, which we think we're going to talk about a little bit later, 132 years of occupation, brutal and savage killing, more than 1.5 million Algerian people, even thinking perhaps 2 million, were butchered by the French colonizers. And it's not only Nigeria, but also, of course, the reason for Algeria is that Algeria became a very powerful symbol, especially in the 1950s and 70s, because of the Battle of Algiers, which killed between 45,000 to 50 or 60,000 people. But anyway, bringing that back, Algeria became the symbol. And we are now seeing more and more of that coming out now today with President Ibrahim Traore, not only because he's young enough, but his ideas seem to be symbolic flags for liberation for most Africans who are saying, we want sovereignty, we want to be able to be in charge of our own sovereignty, that somebody in Paris or in Berlin or in Brussels doesn't dictate who we should be talking to or who we should not be talking to, as we see now with South Africa and the United States. I'm sure you've been aware of that. And in fact, tomorrow, the tariffs go on between South Africa and the United States, I think 30%. So that's going to create all kinds of havoc. And that it's also an attack on South African sovereignty, one way or another. How do you protect that kind of security and sovereignty? And in fact, Mali, Burkina Faso, and then Niger are having a little bit more say on their own sovereignty than I would say even South Africa to a certain degree, especially economic sovereignty. But pure security, Mali, Burkina Faso, and then Niger having a stronger say in what they think it is that most African countries are saying.
But Niger and Mali did the same thing that Burkina Faso did. And you don't really hear about their world leaders or their leaders in the way that you hear about
But in short, the reason is I think the president of Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traore, I mean, he's young enough. He's the youngest of all. And he has a style. He has a style of governing, or at least running the country that really appeals to a lot of young people. Remember, Africa is the most youthful continent in the world. The youth bulge is one of the biggest in the world, with 400 million people, and even a little bit more. Although we know that India is the first, the most populated, and then of course China comes second, and then Africa later. People are seeing in this young man the courage, the strength, the sincerity, and a sense of purpose. So much so that he appeals to a younger crowd, but also not just to the younger crowd, with a sort of rebellious nature to colonialism,
I
and
see.
then to the fact that they can decide whatever they want to use, how they want to use their own resources, like gold, for example, that the French had been exploiting for years. Now they have a bit of control over that. Same in Mali, where they have a control of that. But the difference between the three leaders, I think, is the age and the style of Ibrahim Traore, but also the potential image making behind him. There's a lot of talks that the Russians have managed to really build that image on social media, and it's now taking a sort of storm, a movement by itself, and which is very, very powerful. And every time he gives a speech, remember he was in Russia during the BRICS, and he made a powerful speech. He showed up with the military attire. That really sort of launched his image again and gave him a little bit of strength. And then reputation as a young man, military guy who's now standing up to the West. And people love these kind of messianic talks. And I think
Yeah.
it's giving him also that boost. And I think that would be the way I can qualify that. But he's also not just the image making, but he's also making things happen on the ground. He's focusing on what the challenges the country is going through. Apparently, I mean, now it's a sort of a little bit of rumor, he's refused to go to Washington. He's not picking up the phone calls. And he says he's rather a little bit like Mamdani was saying in New York during the Democratic, campaign debate. Ibrahim Traore is saying, I'd rather stay here in Burkina Faso to deal with our problems than running to Paris, Brussels, and then Berlin to beg for money.
Yeah. I don't blame him, especially since I strongly suspect that if they had their way, they would try to take his life.
Yeah.
And he has to know that. I mean, like, as you point out, these attacks that are taking place on the Sahel states are not random. Who's paying these people to do this?
Of course.
Like, where are they getting the money? Where are they getting the funding? Where are they getting the guns? Right? And, if you look at Paris, I would imagine Paris has some feelings about being kicked out. I would imagine the US has some feelings about being kicked out. When he went to Moscow, if you remember, the day he got back, they were attacked by terrorists.
Yes.
Now, you can say
Yes.
that's random, but that's a hell of a coincidence if it is random. So just to put a pin in this, just for the audience member that asks about it, Russia is effectively helping with the security situation in the Sahel. They're doing so using technology to try to maintain some level of visibility on areas that are very difficult to resolve. I would imagine this is also a boosting to the militaries of these states so they can defend themselves. Is that fair? Is that true?
Yes, that's true. And in fact, as you pick it up nicely, but that kind of partnership has gone beyond security now, basic military defense and security. And it is also clear that, you can't have purely military security issues because you also have economic security issues. However, you must start with military security to safeguard the economic securities. And I think they're understanding that very well because you can have a great economic security and a weak military security and be in trouble. So they're starting with it. And Russia has has sort of upgraded that relationship all the way beyond just military security, but also economic security. As you know, Russia is also signing a deal with Burkina Faso and very soon with Mali to build some civilian nuclear power plants for electricity production and energy. And I think it's a big, big deal. And China is also helping for economic security issues as well. So it's going broadly beyond that, technology, education, cultural stuff. And I think as time goes on, people are hoping that if the young men, especially in Burkina Faso, all those three people are not assassinated because there's a great deal of concern about their security and their safety, things will change very radically in West Africa for sovereignty, not just military or security, basic pure security, but it's also economic security. In fact, the three last week have had a launch of looking at what's called a development bank for those three countries. So this is a big deal away from ECOWAS, as you know. And they're now building slowly. They might even consider having a currency that's going to be backed by what? Guess what? Gold. And these three countries have a lot of it, and that worries the hell out of course, the United States, because the U.S. is worried about de-dollarization, and if they move away from the dollar, that's going to worry the U.S., but also Europeans, because now you have a new currency that might emerge there, and then create some kind of economic sovereignty.
Oh, that's fantastic. That is fantastic. And so that goes on to the economic front about how these countries have been developing. Has there been a significant, I know it's only been a few years, so fair enough, but have you been able to see a significant difference, and have the people on the ground been able to see a significant difference since the changeover in political, it's not really ideology, I guess it's political association, removing themselves from ECOWAS?
Yes, it is ongoing. There's no going back to ECOWAS. And of course, the economic realities are not easy. It's a tough time for them. Remember, they were embargoed and they were just sealed off from the sea and then receiving goods. But there's all kinds of ways to go around that. So they find a way to bypass these things through Mauritania and perhaps even Algeria and sometimes Libya. And they've managed to resist. And their resilience is proven very, very useful because they're still alive and they're still very strong. What they've done is they said, look, we are running our business and our shows, but we're not stopping other Africans from visiting us. So we maintain the same visa system, because ECOWAS, one of the most beneficial, I must say, project was the movement of people in West Africa. This one was just incredible. So somebody from Mali could move to Senegal and live there as if they were in the same country. And that really turned out to be really good. And so those three countries have still maintained that. But they had some really tough times, especially on energy production, electricity, and empowering their industries. They struggled a bit, but they're now emerging slowly. A country like Niger, as you know, Niger had a lot of uranium that the French were exploiting. But boy, my goodness, as soon as they nationalized this, from a few cents that they were getting on the kilo of uranium, they now are getting huge amount of it. And guess what? The economic growth of Niger pulled up to somewhere around, I think, was 6 to 7% in less than 20 years. Yes, but this is just a bit superficial because it needs to trickle down. But Niger also has got huge oil. And guess who was helping them with that? The Chinese. Yeah, the Chinese have invested a huge amount of, And so they're now getting some revenues from it. They were not happy with some of the transaction with the Chinese, but they're back on board and they're now collecting a great deal of resources for their country. So in 2 years, or 2 years and 5 days for Niger, but even 3 years for the three countries, it's not yet enough. But we can see that people are even hoping. They know it's not going to be easy, and they're prepared to go through those tough times for better days. And I think this is the resilience element that we need to support and we need to encourage. But there's a lot of contraband, trafficking, and so forth. So they're beating up all the sanctions, and they're surviving.
Yeah, I am a true believer in this idea that if a country left its devices, will be better off. And let's be honest, they were already going through tough times. I mean, France was raping them on the uranium thing. I mean, they were getting like pennies on the dollar of what France was. So no, this is a good thing from my point of view. And I guess we'll see how good it is in a decade when, you get let's say, a more full-fledged sense of what these governments need to be.
Look, some people are worried about democratic rules and so forth, and that the president of the military president of Mali, he just extended his own state for another 5 years. And they're saying, wait a minute, what's going on here? But we need to also remain vigilant so that these military rulers don't take advantage of the goodwill of the people and people support some kind of Pan-African resurgence. And that's this goodwill must not be violated when we're so that people now get what they really put them there for and supporting them. Because usually they turn around and they change their speeches and they're starting becoming the house niggers that we know and we've known for so many years. And we can start seeing that with Senegal. Joe Mai-Fai, who was put there by his Prime Minister Sonko, is now playing some kind of game. Of course, he was invited to Washington. Remember that as part of the 5 African presidents who were invited by President Trump.
Trump.
And guess what? He was asking President Trump to come and do to Senegal, build a golf course. Can you believe that?
Was he? Was he?
It's shocking.
Let's hit the democracy thing for a bit, because I think that's a fascinating question. Like, we have there's a bias for democratic rule. There's a democracy is the worst system with the exception of everything else. That's the way they say it. I don't know if that's true, to be honest. Like, I can't say that. I can't say that. It's complicated. When if you have a democratic system that is a parody of itself because it's being controlled externally, then that's not really beneficial to the masses or the public. And if you look at the United States, and they call the United States a democracy, okay, well, it's like 1% of what the public wants in the United States is espoused in the law. The overwhelming majority of what the public wants is not founded in the law. Instead, you got kleptocrats and oligarchs who have effectively control of the political system. Okay, is that a great system? No, in the sense of the US. If you can get a democratic order where you don't have this overt financial interests, maybe, but I don't see those around the globe. And so I guess, long story short, that's a lot of wood to chop. I'm saying, if we're talking about Mali, Niger, or for that matter, Burkina Faso, I would imagine they want enough time to instantiate a system that is politically aggressive or politically, what's the word, resilient, to prevent the moment that you get the first president. Hey, man, let's come to the US, let's have a conversation. Oh, hey, can you build me a golf course? That would be a death knell. If the moment that Ibrahim Traore gives up power and the next president goes to the US to build a golf course, then it all failed. I hope you get my point.
Yes, so I get your point. Yeah, let me give you my take on this. I mean, many of us who studied under colonial French systems, education, remember contextually in the old days when Alexis de Tocqueville wrote Democracy in America, which was, the grand idea that this is a new place, a new world where, people were looking at, the government by the people, for the people, and so forth. Those little things that we know as a meme. But things have evolved. In fact, in the United States, people don't think there is a democracy anymore. They think about, some kind of plutocracy, and it's been going on, in fact, for centuries. It's not that many of us are, finding about these kind of things because President Trump is making those things so visible. But if you were to bring that to Africa, which, modern democracy ideas were sold to Africans, especially in the late, let's say, 80s or so, where you have the idea that you should spread, power among people, figure out you have all kinds of ways to check a dictator. But it has evolved so much so that there are democracies, not just democracy, because democracy in America doesn't mean much to the same way it means to South Africa today. And they're customized in a way that, of course, they share, some of the similar backbones, but there are differences and so in places. If today somebody says that you can't criticize Israel in the United States, but in South Africa you can do that, right?
Right.
You can speak it out. In France you can't do that, you see, but they're supposed to be under a democracy. So which means even in the United States, you can criticize the United States because of the First Amendment. But you can't criticize a foreign country. That's almost unbelievably, it's incredible to see that under a democracy. So in the Sahel, we can't talk about democracy at this stage, especially in those 3 countries, because they're run by, military dictators who've taken power away from a specific consensus. However, people are saying, wait a minute, they've taken power because the Democrats who were there were supposedly elected. sometimes fraudulently and cheating at the ballot boxes, didn't deliver at all. We're still in the same mess. You know, unemployment is skyrocketing. Extreme poverty is the worst thing. Inequalities are going worse. Corruption is even worse. And then crime of all sorts are running around. Those 5 challenges that I call Afropocalypse are really difficult to fight. And the military guys are saying, we need to offer an alternative way of government that could help us to stabilize the way we live. It's not about ideology or democracy, but can we get the basics, if we want to talk about, quote unquote, the Maslow hierarchy of needs, you know, a place to stay, food, security, take our kids to school. I mean, these are some of the basic things that we're not getting, but we didn't get them under democracy. So we'd like to try something new. And the citizen of this country said, yes, let's try something new. We don't care as long as the people are there can help us to fix those challenges. We'll be with them for a while. And then if we find another way to create a democratic system that works for us, we'll buy into it. And this is what I'm seeing emerging, not just in the Sahel, but also in different places in Africa, where even if you have a dictator that stays there for a while, but who can provide those basic things, you know, with a few here and there, people will say, yeah, let's keep that person there for a while. And that's what's emerging more and more in Africa right now. But there's no assurance that these military people would want to give up power later. So
it's a risk. It is a risk.
Yeah.
It's a
It's
risk.
a huge risk.
But the risk really come out of nowhere.
And, you know, Jamal, it's a risk to take, to test it out. If you're not risking that investment, you're not going to get a return that you want.
Yeah. I mean, and again, it's not like it was going great. Like, meaning this didn't come out of nowhere. This wasn't like, you know, God just struck this out of the blue. This was purely based on material circumstances that were on the ground where this evolved. And God, man, I'm so glad you bring in Maslow theory of needs, because it is a truth statement to say that plants don't grow by themselves, and neither do human beings. Like, you know, you need food, clothing, shelter, air, sense of self, energy. All of these things are necessary for anything to come into its own fruition. And if you do not have those things, that thing will suffer. And I know I added clothing, you don't have to add clothing, but I hope you get my point. Like, it's very, if people needs aren't met, they will suffer. It's a very basic thing. They need oxygen, right? You need energy. You need this sense of self within the context of a larger system of society. You need to be able to make your way. And when you take those things away, you get a disease in your society. It's like anything else. If your body doesn't have vitamin A, that body is going to suffer. If it doesn't have vitamin E.
Right.
No, God, that's a really good point. Such a good point. You mentioned BRICS. Trump is adding, it is not a coincidence that Donald Trump and the countries that he's going after, Brazil, South Africa, India, China, because he will have to go after China, especially if he's passing the secondary sanctions on Russia. China's already said, we don't care. We don't care. We don't care. Do whatever you want. This is Trump. And I want to get your take on this. Trump, who played the shuck and jive game of, yeah, man, I believe in the multipolar world. Okay, whatever, man, habitual liars lie. This is him when asked about it, and listen to what he says here. And I want to get your take on this statement by him, because I think it's telling. It's more honest than he typically is, and the mask of his actions come off.
Russia, what is that additional penalty, and are other countries facing the same threat?
Well, we're negotiating right now, and it's also BRICS. You know, they have BRICS, which is basically a group of countries that are anti the United States, and India is a member of that, if you can believe it. It's an attack on the dollar, and we're not going to let anybody attack the dollar. So it's partially BRICS, and it's partially the trade situation. It's the deficit. We had a tremendous deficit. So, as you know, Prime Minister Modi is a friend of mine, but they don't do very much business in terms of business with us. They sell a lot to us, but we don't buy from them. You know why? Because the tariff is so high. They have one of the highest tariffs in the world. Now they're willing to cut it very substantially, but we'll see what happens. We're talking to India now. We'll see what happens. It doesn't matter too much whether we have a deal or whether we charge them a certain tariff. But you'll know at the end of this week.
I swear, man, I believe it or not, I am pro-Trump doing this. I am pro-Trump doing this. I find it to be an accelerant. I think all of these countries need to come together and tell him to F off. That's what I want to happen. I pray for that day where all of them get on stage together, lock arms, and just say F the F off, and then walk off stage, drop the mic, and leave.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's going to happen.
It may not happen because all these countries have a different ways of dealing with relationship. They're not open, but in private, they're saying it. They're showing, the finger in private. Yeah, in private, they're doing it. I mean, you can hear also Chinese analysts and then politicians like Victor Gao, the former, speech,
he's another hard ass.
Of Deng Xiaoping is really up and then he's taking them on. So they're doing that by proxy. And the Chinese are not, in your face type of people. It's not quite their culture, but with time, they're going to have to come out of their torpor or their quiet mood and so forth. But you can also see that they're very, very bullish and tough with their spokespersons. When you see that they're, foreign spokesperson and so forth. Putin, for example, is very quiet, almost subdued, but he carries a really big stick right in the back. He said, okay, this and this, but then from time to time, he shows that stick. And that's the style of the BRICS. But the BRICS are such an eclectic mix of countries that one of the things that makes them also both powerful, but also fragile, is that on one hand, you have 2 or 3 of them, especially China and Russia, that are very strong. I would say India is sort of a little bit in the middle. South Africa and Brazil are sort of some of the weakest links a little bit, but they're slowly becoming a very consolidated group with now the BRICS plus, other countries that are coming in. But I think President Trump is missing out. He's not getting the big message. These are countries that are slowly, in fact, they're much larger than the United States. And trade between the BRICS countries has gone up by 30%. I mean, this is huge since the war in Ukraine, and then also the problem in the Middle East. And they're growing steadily. China now is doing more business in Asia than anywhere else, although it's still very present in places like Mexico, where they're selling cars and EVs. They're dominant across the value chain of almost everything, from electric vehicles to satellite stuff to largely also rare earth minerals. They're dominating all these fields. So Trump is missing out something. He still is sitting on the fact that, yes, the United States is the most powerful country in the world. It's not anymore. We've seen it with those 2 wars, the one in Ukraine and then the one in the Middle East with Israel and Iran. I mean, anybody who are missing those weaknesses really needs help. Those who are very genuine about analyzing the power of the United States will know that the US is very weak now, and they're making a big mistake to try to attack China at this stage. And they're running out of ammunition. I mean, I've never heard this sort of nonsense that a great power is running out of ammunition. Jamal, I just can't understand that. I mean, analysts, some of the best analysts are saying it. In the US is also, the politicians and the military in the US are agreeing with this. Unless they're playing a double game on us, they're trying to play weak and then hit hard later. But the facts are showing that they're not that good, because if they were good enough, let's take this whole thing between Israel and Iran, where the whole West, including the United States and European countries, were supporting Israel. They just couldn't make a dent into the missiles of Iran. That shows that there's something wrong somewhere there. And then, of course, in Ukraine, where Russia is just pounding, the West. It's just unbelievable. They're just talking. I was listening to Ruta last time talking about a NATO guy talking about how powerful NATO is coming out now. President Macron said, okay, we're coming after Russia. And then what's that, Starmer of Britain said, yeah, it's saying, oh, we're coming after Russia. They've been saying this for months and years now. Nothing is happening. So those weaknesses are something to pay attention, and they better be very careful when we bring that to the BRICS to close, which means the BRICS will start to bind if one of them is seriously attacked. Like Iran was attacked, but it didn't really come out clearly, but they were helping. And I'm sure you've heard that Russia has already been moving some S-400s there already. China is also moving in some fighters. So they're now slowly building up. They're not groups of people who will put themselves in your face and say, yes, we're going to be fighting you. Here's what we have and so forth. They're a bit more subdued, modest, but they will deliver a powerful blow to the West. If the US attempts to attack China, this is going to change everything.
Oh,
there
man.
Will be
that is the end of the world. That is the end of the world.
That's the end of the world.
Yeah.
And the only thing everybody's worried, of course, is nuclear war. But even if you were to kill 1 billion Chinese, there will be 400 million more left, right? You see what I mean?
Still more than the US, yeah.
Thank you. And the US better be very careful in straddling this kind of emerging crisis in the world and continuously manufacturing crises that the world doesn't need. And I kept saying to people, I had my interview the other day with the media, the US is not building, it's just destroying with wanton trade economics on all the countries, even with our own allies. They just cut a deal this week with the EU. And that makes it a bit difficult for allies to even support the US. And all of that, in case of a war, the US better be very careful because people can shift alliances.
That's US policy to set fires.
Yeah.
Like if you let China, like if you let countries just proceed, let's say the US takes this kind of kumbaya, let the world do what the world does. We're just going to believe in capitalism and competition, and the better competitor wins. Okay, the US is going to lose. We can't compete, at least not in the way that we organize ourselves. Like we don't invest heavily in education. We don't invest.
I mean, Jamal, China is building the world, literally.
Yeah.
From Asia to India to Pakistan to all the way to Mexico, at the borders of the United States, all the way to Africa. I mean, tell me today, you give me an example of building that the United States has put serious infrastructure that the US is building in Africa or any place else. Tell me, where is it? Besides just funding weapons and then the military industrial complex. That's the only thing we hear.
Yeah.
We don't hear anything else that they're building, making societies live better, changing the world in a way that people are hopeful. They're stressing the world with every time they speak out. The president speaks, oh no, we're going to deal with this guy. We're going to, if they don't do this, it's all threat. And Chinese are saying, no, we want to build, open up.
That was a mistake. That was a severe mistake. Because if you think about it, if you were in Africa and you're saying, we built military bases in Africa. Okay, that sounds great, but doesn't really do anything to the economies. That doesn't give you these kind of good feelings of, hey, they built energy, they built infrastructure, they built roads, they built et cetera. Whereas China's, that's their go-to, right? We are making this country better. That's our investment into the country. Those are different things, and they leave different taste in your mouth when you think about things.
I mean, China, according to I think the Carnegie Foundation came out with some kind of, what do they call that, polls? 76 or 80%, close to that, Africans are seeing China in a better light than they see the United States. I mean, this is just unbelievable. You couldn't think about this 20 or 30 years ago.
That is amazing. What do you, I mean, this could be the last question. What do you think, what do you think? Do you believe that BRICS on some level is going to require some kind of military thing to defend itself? Because if you
They'll
think
have
about
to do
yeah,
They'll have to do it. They'll have to. You can't have economic security without a strong backing of a defense system that protects it.
no,
If not, you're going to be weak. And this is where China has done it for itself. It said, look, we are global economic power, but we must really defend it with the military power. So they're
right,
investing hugely in the military power to be able to protect their assets, their wealth around the world, in case there are big attacks on them. And I think slowly, but perhaps, as you said earlier, they will have to go faster because as President Trump pushes them towards a cliff, they're going to say, we're just doing it. That's it. And then they'll come up with something. And the Iran-Israel conflict has taught them something, and they are preparing for it. And they're blazing the guns. They're waiting for this kind of crisis to happen.
Koffi, you are fantastic, man. You're fantastic. Thank you for this. Koffi Kouakou, he is an African analyst, senior research fellow for the Center, or at the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Koffi, you have a fantastic rest of your day, man. Thank you for this.